One of the questions I get the most on my channel is, what is fascism? The people always want me to define it. Luckily, this guy named Lawrence Britt already defined it with what's called the 14 points of fascism. What he did, he looked at all of the totalitarians and fascist regimes like Francoism and Hitler's Nazi Germany and many, many others. It all boiled down to these 14 points. It's not exactly academic, but it's generally looked at as like this touchstone. Like, if these are the 14 things that you're seeing, then you might have some fascism on your hands, or at the very least, a totalitarian regime that must be extirpated. The first point in Dr. Lawrence Britt's 14 points of fascism: powerful and continuing nationalism. You see Donald Trump do this all the time, where he has like a big flag behind him, or he uses the military as a prop, or he hugs the flag, or he does all sorts of creepy shit. Now, you might say that other presidents have done this. Skyjack Morgan, how dare you say that just because Donald Trump is hugging the flag and dry humping it against the flag's consent, that everybody does. Everybody humps flags. What are you talking about? Everybody takes a Bible and puts the Pledge of Allegiance and the Constitution inside the Bible, thereby breaking the Constitution and the Bible at the same time. No, not everyone has done this. This hyper type of nationalism, where if you aren't waving a flag, you're not as American as me, that we are now saying, like, what kind of American are you? You're the enemy from within if you disagree with us. That has not been done before, but rest assured, even if you think all of that is great, you think hyper-nationalism is A-okay, well, you're in luck, because this is only the first point. Flags everywhere. The point is, they're using the flag to divide us rather than unite us. That's the big point of nationalism, right? You're dividing us from the dissenters, those who have a different opinion and you're only allowing the people who share MAGA's opinion. Those are the people who are real Americans. That's a problem. Disdain for human rights is number 2. And everybody, no matter how you feel about Donald Trump, he has complete disdain for human rights. Now, you could say the freedom of speech is a human right, and he's against that. He's against the freedom to cross borders. He's against the freedom of movement. MAGA is against human rights. If you're brown or black or born someplace else, you are no longer considered a human being and have no human rights. You'll hear it all the time in the comment threads. If there's a MAGA person there, they're perfectly willing to say that if you are an illegal, that you don't have human rights. They aren't interested in human rights. They think that you have no right to due process, even though the Constitution actually tells you do. They think that you should be allowed to take people and put them in concentration camps. Now, you might say, well, they're not concentration camps. Guantanamo Bay is a concentration camp. Alligator Alcatraz is a concentration camp. If you're being held without prosecution and without due process, you are a hostage. You are not a prisoner. Another part of denying people human rights is the denying healthcare as a human right. Right now, as I'm filming this, the government is shut down. And the reason why it's shut down is because the Republicans, MAGA, doesn't like the idea that sometimes someone who is here without documentation is allowed to go to an emergency room. They'll say it's healthcare, that they're getting healthcare, but they cannot get healthcare because they're being denied that human right. They cannot get health insurance, not through the government anyway, because they're being denied that. But they can go to the emergency room because we don't like the idea that we'll have dead people in the streets if we don't allow people who are here to go to the hospital when they're bleeding from the head, for example. Now, MAGA doesn't care about that. They want to deny the human right of seeking medical attention. Now, you could also look at other healthcare issues within that. Trans people, why can't they seek the health care that they want, the health services that they want? Why can't women see the health services they want? Is this something that's protected as a human right, to have a conversation with your doctor without the government sticking its nose in? Well, that's up to you. But it is one of the 14 points of fascism, the disdain for human rights. Police kill marginalized people indiscriminately, and beating people in the street right now. American citizens are being denied access to work because every time they show up to work, they get arrested. This has happened to American citizens, not illegal immigrants, but this is a disdain for human rights. I think that's very clear. Number 2. Number 3 is the identification of scapegoats or enemies of the state. This is pretty basic and pretty easy to see with Donald Trump. MAGA has a few scapegoats. The LGBTQ plus community, they're a perfect scapegoat, super vulnerable, very little power. You can crush them quite easily without making much noise. Trans people are the most vulnerable of that community of the LGBTQ plus. So they will be affected first and worst. They're being used as a scapegoat. Every single time you hear a MAGA person talk about something, they'll bring up something completely unrelated to trans rights. They'll bring that into the conversation to make a point because they need that scapegoat. They can justify anything by using the gays, the trans, or whomever as a scapegoat. They'll also use immigrants, illegals they'll call them. They'll need to dehumanize them first, but they'll use illegals. But it doesn't stop there. They also have educators. Educators are often used as scapegoats because they're radicalizing the youth or whatever. They'll make up shit. The universities, this is quite common for authoritarians. They'll use them as a scapegoat. Journalists, quite common. I mean, Hitler called them Lügenpresse. Our guy calls them the fake news, right? It's global elites. It's common to use global elites. These boogeymen. These are scapegoats. You can blame somebody that doesn't actually exist or ones that are perfectly vulnerable and are easily crushed. They even have campaigns like saying that caravans are coming. I don't know if you remember the caravans are coming to the border. Charlie Kirk often talked about the replacement, that immigrants are coming here to replace the white man. This is something that every authoritarian organization does. They also call them domestic enemies. So you have the invasion. You hear this all the time. Donald Trump calls them invaders, narco terrorists, stuff like that. And also domestic enemies, or as Donald Trump calls them, homegrowns. That he even told Bukele, the dictator of El Salvador, that he wants him to build more concentration camps for our homegrown enemies. That should give you pause. And it should give you chills. Number 4 is the supremacy of the military. Well, this is something anarchists have been talking about for over 100 years, that when you have the supremacy of the military, that's also to keep you in line. We're supposed to be using the military to keep other countries in line. That's kind of its purpose, but it's always a threat to the people inside the country as well. And we have an act called the Posse Comitatus Act. It's to keep the military from ever performing any law enforcement duties or being deployed in the United States of America. But we have done it now. We have federalized troops and sent the Marines. In the case of Los Angeles, these things are happening. If you question anything about the military, well, then you are the enemy. You're wrong because the military is supreme. The U.S. military budget exceeds the next 10 countries combined. The ICE, which is a paramilitary law enforcement organization from the federal government, is the most well-funded law enforcement agency in the history of the world. Militarized police is something we've grown used to. When I was a kid, the cops did not carry around AR-15 style weaponry and come to every call with a full metal jacket, with a full flak jacket and clips and grenades and all the rest. That's not what cops looked like. Today, cops often use military surplus or actually test less than lethal weapons for the military. That started with LAPD doing it, but now it's pretty commonplace all over. You'll see police don't look like police anymore from when I was a child. They might as well be the Marines. Sometimes it's hard to tell them apart, actually. It's harrowing. And that's number 4, the supremacy of the military. So check. Number 5 is rampant sexism. Part of fascism is this hyper-masculinity, but it's mostly bullshit. MAGA shuts down Grindr. Like, they crash Grindr every time they throw a party. masculinity is often performative. What it really is sexism. Women have to be second-class citizens in a totalitarian regime because it gives them more of a reason to be in charge, you see. They have to be. They are the father figures. So you'll hear even Jesse Waters call Donald Trump daddy. You'll hear it quite frequently. You'll hear this, if you listen for it, you'll hear a lot of these patronymics or paternalist terms used when talking about the regime. In America, we've gotten rid of Roe v. Wade with the Dobbs decision so that women can no longer seek the same medical attention as a man. Women are no longer able to have or enjoy the same privileges of doctor-client, doctor-patient privilege as men are in most states. It's just gone. Women no longer have the same protection under the law. Politicians are also promoting rigid gender identity norms and targeting transgendered people. The existence of transgendered people throws a wrench in this hyper-sexist environment. We really are dismissing the fact that there are predators in our midst, rapists like Donald Trump. That shit's dismissed, even if he actually does actual crimes like Brett Kavanaugh and also Clarence Thomas. All these people, they'll simply dismiss it as locker room talk or boys will be boys. And that is really dangerous. It puts women on a lower rung of the hierarchy. And that hierarchy is extremely important to the fascist. You have to have someone on top, and they will put themselves on top, and everyone is under that. A lot of people will be happy to just be a little under that. They don't mind because at least they're not on the bottom rung, you see. Some people, they'll invest in that hierarchy because they're perfectly willing to be in that middle rung. They'll take the abuse because at least they're not on the bottom. You'll see this a lot in fascism. Number 6. Controlled mass media. Now, of course, Donald Trump has sued everyone at this point, probably. Famously, Disney and Paramount, CBS Paramount, called on them to fire Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert and other late night hosts who make fun of him. Anyone who makes fun of him, you'll incur his ire. This happened with Kathy Griffith. It's happened lots of people over the years now with Donald Trump, where he tries to cancel people for making fun of him. He has a thin skin, he admits it, but also it gets worse because the media is controlled by the billionaire class. The lazy class owns the media. They own every talking point. They will never allow you to actually talk about a real leftist agenda or a workers' party or any of that. There are major things happening in the workers' revolution, but you won't ever hear it on the news because they are controlling the narrative. You'll never even be exposed to those ideas. They're very good at that. And they make it seem like there's a robust conversation going on between these two options, Democrat and Republican, but it's like choosing between Diet Coke and Coke when Mr. Coca-Cola is making all the money. Mr. Coca-Cola is controlling that narrative, controlling that robust discussion, those debates. Politicians are labeling dissenting outlets, people who are outside of that or who even deign to get a little too close to the truth. They call them the enemy of the people or fake news. We've already talked about this. And lucky you, you're also living in the age of the algorithm. So if you are into this side or that side of this supposedly robust debate, the algorithm will funnel you more deeply into that debate, more deeply into that side of things so that you feel like you're getting something out of it, so that you'll always be in that echo chamber. You'll never hear anything outside of that. Now, what we normally hear about when we're talking about these things is that the algorithm will keep MAGA from ever hearing the other side, and they'll keep everyone else, like the blue dogs or the Democrats, they'll keep them from ever hearing any of the good stuff about MAGA. But it's far worse than that. They're keeping you here, and outside is freedom and liberty and something greater. So maybe new ideas that you might be afraid of, maybe some crazier shit that you haven't even thought of, you haven't been exposed to, because they're keeping you here. This is what the algorithm's actually doing right here. It keeps you narrow-minded. Number 7 is the obsession with national security. Now, This is where we get into terrorism and why everything is called a terrorist now. They're able to kill civilians in Venezuela because they'll call them narco-terrorists, but they won't actually provide any proof that they're narco-terrorists. What even is a narco-terrorist? These are civilians selling drugs? Is that what they are? Is that what a terrorist is? A terrorist is a person who attacks civilian populations for a political goal. Is that what these people that are being murdered in Venezuela are doing? I don't think so. Is that what Antifa's doing? By yelling and screaming and saying, hey, we want to resist? Are they attacking civilian populations for political goals? No, but they'll be called terrorists and they'll say that this is national security. They have to do that. This is why George W. Bush started this whole war on terror. We had the war on drugs with Ronald Reagan. And now today we've taken that, we've cranked it all the way to 11. And this isn't just Donald Trump, by the way. This is shit like Barack Obama, George W. Bush. They've all done it, but it's just gotten worse. It's getting worse every day. It gets worse with things like border walls, ICE raids, endless rhetoric of law and order. You're against law and order if you think that you should be free to move where you want to move, go where you want to go, say what you want to say. This is true terror. They are the terrorists. The government is terrorizing its citizens. They'll dress it up as national security. But if you give up your freedom for security, you don't deserve freedom and you don't deserve security. You deserve neither. You can never let them take your liberty. But that is what they're coming for. They want to control you. That's what authoritarianism is. Religion and government become intertwined. That's number 8. Christian nationalism rising with the leaders of America. Look what we've seen with things like Charlie Kirk's memorial service. If that wasn't religion being entwined with government, I don't know what is. Heck says speaks to the generals. He's pointing up, talking about Jesus and God and all of these things. That's not normal, folks. That's totalitarianism creeping in. This is always one of the signs. Policy is being shaped by religious rhetoric. Things like the anti-trans stuff, the anti-lady stuff, the anti-abortion stuff, the anti-LGBTQ plus stuff. That's all being pushed by religious rhetoric. Even the anti-education stuff. It's cloaked in religious shit. I mean, I think it was Lewis Sinclair who said that when fascism comes to America, it will be wrapped in a flag and clutching a Bible. Yeah, but it's all fascism is like this. It all comes where religion and government become intertwined. And I always argue about this one, number 9, I think is the most clear, obvious example of American-style fascism, and its corporate power becomes protected. I think that one of the clearest examples of the rise of fascism is when corporate power and government goals become so closely aligned that they become indiscernible. The people are no longer served by government or the industrialists. The industrialists are now serving the government, and the government is serving the industrialists, the oligarch. This is something that we saw with Hitler's rise. It was very, very obvious, where they were turning Jewish people into slaves and then renting them out to Mercedes and to Porsche and Volkswagen. Volkswagen was the same thing back then, sort of. Don't get hung up on that shit. The point is that corporations, corporatists, industrialists become super closely related with the government. This is why it's so important to pay attention to who's in your cabinet, how many billionaires are on the government payroll. These people are not your friends. These people are not in it for serving the people. They're not interested in that. They're interested in consolidating power. That corporate power is protected through government bailouts, through government protections, through the elimination of watchdog organizations and institutions like the EPA. When you eliminate the people who are watching the watchmen, well, guess what? The corporations can run amok. They can poison your rivers and streams, and guess who gets fucked? You. Corporations are shielded from liability. They can't be sued. The meatpacking plants during COVID-19 outbreaks were bailed out. Right now, they're talking about bailing out the soy farmers of America, especially in places like Arkansas, because of our trade war with China. Last time this happened, when Donald Trump was president in 2018, we spent $23 billion to the soy farmers of America because China, why should they buy their soy from us? You and I will pay for that. Billionaire corporations will do fine. Probably some small farmers will go out of business and be bought up by larger corporations. Number 10, labor power is suppressed. Union membership is at historic lows already, and they're always talking shit on unions. That's something that they always do in these cases, because when we organize, labor power is extremely important to human rights. You have nothing. You were only born with your ability to sell your labor because you weren't born a billionaire. Well, you should be organizing with all of your labor friends. They don't like that shit. Because you start organizing, you become more powerful. You become more powerful, it starts to erode their consolidation, their silos of power, and they hate that shit. Corporations start union busting, right to work laws become more prevalent, weakening your right to protest and organize, and strikes are met with legal and political hostility. Well, general strikes are illegal in America, but it looks like we might actually have a general strike coming up. We'll see. Again, that might be one of those things you want to look into about what labor unions are up to and whether or not there are a bunch of collective bargaining agreements expiring all at the same time in the near future. What will the world look like if that happens? Celebrate May Day. People died for your right to take the weekend off and work 40-hour work weeks. Number 11 is the disdain for intellectuals and the arts. Donald Trump is now the head of the John F. Kennedy Center of the Arts in Washington, D.C. He just took it over because he's in charge of the arts now. They want to get rid of liberal professors, anyone involved in the humanities. They want out. They hate the idea of teaching anything about the humanities. Humanities are scary for people. They don't want to hear anything about Shakespeare, poetry, or anything that might ruffle some feathers or challenge the power structure. And art generally does that. It generally challenges the powerful. Even comedy is only really funny. The reason why right-wing comedy never quite works is because right-wing comedy is usually propping up the powerful, whereas even as old stuff like Charlie Chaplin, he knew that it was very, very funny to watch a Charlie Chaplin, the tramp character, kick a person in a tuxedo in the ass. That's funny. Kicking a cop in the ass is funny because you're always punching up towards the people in power. There's comedy there. You can find it. Punishing people who are lower than you are, making fun of people who have no power, isn't as funny, and it feels bad. It feels bad to make fun of people who have no power unless you're a sadistic piece of shit like Donald Trump, who loves making fun of the disabled, for example. Donald Trump loves making jokes about the disabled. It's not very funny. It doesn't really feel good to make fun of the disabled. That's why racist jokes are usually told in secret or with whispers, because you might get a little chuckle out of a racist joke if it's told well, but it doesn't really feel right, does it? It's not really marketable anymore, is it? Because it doesn't feel good. Right-wing jokes never quite work. Right-wing art never quite slaps, does it? So now we have anti-woke campaigns targeting critical race theory or anything that's kind of gender studies, anything that's a little, even climate science is considered now too woke, too intellectual to be looking at the climate and trying to figure out what's going on. Anyone who's trying to kind of reach out to underserved communities, kibosh on that. Meanwhile, there's a ton of hostility towards artists who criticize the state, mostly in the form of comedians, but it doesn't stop there. Anyone who criticizes the state gets punished. Number 12 is the obsession with crime and punishment. Do I even need to go over the crime and punishment one? I mean, crime and punishment, mass incarceration is unmatched globally. We have more people in jail than any other country in the world. We have a higher percentage of our citizens in jail than any country in the world. This isn't something that started with Donald Trump, but it's something that's been, again, turned up to 11 with Donald Trump. There's a reason why other presidents were able to deport higher numbers than Donald Trump without building concentration camps, but Donald Trump wants to take your money and give it more to Tom Homan so that he can build more beds, he says. Build more beds, which he means a bigger and bolder, badder, and stronger concentration camps. We have militarized police force targeting communities of color. I mean, we see this over and over again. This is, again, something that's been happening a long time in America, but under Donald Trump, it's kind of in your face, right? If you're brown and you're a citizen, even if you go to work, you might go home 3 days later because you were arrested and you just happen to be brown. So you were attacked by the police. This is happening more and more and more. We also see the calls for harsher sentences, even in the case of children. Jeanine Pirro is on TV every day saying that she wants to incarcerate children and even bring the death penalty down to children of 14 years old if they commit a crime. This is an obsession. This is something that they can't let go of. You have to be about crime and punishment, never about rehabilitation, never about what we're doing with the justice system, not even about justice, really. They want to punish people they call criminals. They don't want you to act. They don't care if you are a criminal. They just want to be seen as punishing criminals. Them calling you a criminal makes you a criminal in this scenario. You see this every day. If you're a criminal, it's because they said so, not because they proved it in a court of law. You've been denied due process more and more. Number 13 is rampant cronyism and corruption. The Trump crime family has made billions of dollars in the first year of his presidency. In the second term, they've opened crypto exchanges. They've made deals with foreign governments. They are opening up resorts and hotels in other countries. They're making billions and billions of dollars. There's so many different ways to bribe this president. Meanwhile, in the first term and now in the second term, a lot of his friends and allies from the business world and even his own family members are being appointed in positions of government, and they're enriching themselves as well from their positions. There's a revolving door between regulators and the industries they regulate. You see that, well, right now we're just getting rid of the regulators, but the industry people are going in and out of the government. You saw this with Rex Tillerson, was an oil tycoon who was appointed by Donald Trump to serve in the cabinet. And but you see, he's not an isolated incident. You could look at his cabinet filled with billionaires who are his friends, people that he knows. These scandals are dismissed as commonplace or just business as usual, but this isn't business as usual. This isn't normal. You used to get punished and fired for corruption. Now it's just, that's just Trump being Trump. And they make an excuse saying, well, Biden did it or Obama did it or whoever did it. But this is why we need to be holding our leaders accountable regardless of party. Stop repeating your politicians. Stop being in a cult of party. Your party is bullshit. These people, if you allow them to, will take your money, give it to their friends and family, and leave you out in the cold. And the more you let them get away with it, the closer we get to something like Donald Trump. Donald Trump just didn't just fall out of the sky. His road to the White House was paved. And we always thought that, hey, our Constitution is going to save us. But Donald Trump doesn't believe in the Constitution. He wouldn't even touch the Bible during the inauguration, refused to touch it. So, if he has no moral compass and he has no doctrine to guide him, then how can you trust him? Number 14 is fraudulent elections. This one's a little bit difficult to understand because gerrymandering is real and both sides do it. But what they did in Texas this year by gerrymandering in an off year, normally what happens is every 10 years they do a census as is dictated by the Constitution. Every state does it a little differently. They draw the new districts based on the census data. This is something that is normal. It's not normal to do it in 2025 when 2030 is next census. So what they did in Texas was just completely corrupt, steals the election, basically. They are trying to guarantee themselves 5 extra seats in 2026. This is something where you see that these voter suppression tactics are targeting minorities. They're also targeting young people. If you can't get the day off to vote and you've got 8 hours to wait in line in some of these places, or 6 hours or 1 hour, 3 hours, if you can't make voting easy, you make it more difficult. It disenfranchises people. Donald Trump has made it well known that he hates mail-in voting. He wants to stop it. Why? Because he doesn't want an election. He doesn't want to make it easy for people to vote. He hates the idea of you voting and being able to take away his power. This is all about power. The fact that you have the ability to take it away scares the shit out of him. It's the only thing that scares him, which means you have to do something about it. If they try to close your polling locations, you have to stand up. It's either stand up, push back, or bend over at this point. This is the 14th point of fascism. They're going to purge voter rolls. They're going to require stricter ID laws. They're going to close polling stations. They're going to move polling stations. They want to make it more difficult for you to vote. Shit, they're trying to outlaw, which is, I think, impossible, but who knows? Nothing's impossible these days. But it should be impossible for them to outlaw mail-in voting because it should be left up to the states. But if you get the states to do what you want through coercion, you could successfully steal the election. Rhetoric about stolen elections, that in itself checks the box for the 14th point of fascism. And who has complained more about a stolen election than Donald Trump? Nobody. In fact, he even led a violent coup against our nation's capital with people who were screaming to hang Mike Pence in order to force him to refuse to certify the election, which is insane. This is the 14th point of the rise of a totalitarian. Dr. Lawrence Britt, he really did a good, I think, assessment of what fascism is. And now you should be able to talk about fascism well after watching this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. What's happened at this point is that America has entered late-stage democratic decline. We're witnessing our slide into totalitarianism. There are people being beaten in the streets. Those are the obvious things. There's soldiers in the streets. It's super obvious. But we need to be always vigilant in noticing all of these 14 points in order to hopefully prevent them from happening again, and maybe keep them from taking root in America today. It is possible to still stop this. You still have the power. In fact, the people always have the power. It's just that the people in control have the ability to strip you of that power if you allow them to. But it's a dangerous game. The people, when they have too much of their power stripped of them, they usually react violently. And then the narrative will be all about how violent protesters have done horrible things. But they aren't. They're just trying to be free. Will you be pro-freedom or pro-democracy, or will you be pro-fascism? Because that's your option now. We're playing defense at the 0-yard line, to use a football metaphor. We're just there. And the totalitarians, the fascists, are about to score a touchdown. And it's really hard to take it back from them. It's going to be really hard to dig ourselves out of this hole. My name is Skyjack Morgan. I'm a free speech and critical thinking advocate and a news and culture commentator, and I'm totally independent. Thank you so much for watching. Please hit that like button and subscribe. Bye.